I don't know if this is coming through, but there is a whole bunch of metal in there. Let me see if I can grab a flashlight to help illuminate that. Like, I saw the oil right from the get-go, or the metal in the oil right from the get-go, just down in here. So I'm 100% sure it's not from the test, or from the opener. Well, look at that. That thing, whatever happened inside that engine, that thing is 100% effed. Oh boy. There's also a little spring down there for the oil filter. Look at that. Oh. Oh, I gotta get some more paper towel and pour this thing out. Just so you know, I just moved everything over a little bit to give us a little more room. We will get back to the media. But, oh man, like, you honestly don't even need to like look at the media to see all of the metal in this thing. That's so catastrophic. Like, look at that. There's just this huge puddle down here of debris. But look at that. Crazy. It's a real mechanic's life when you're asking for a tool to cut open oil filters for your birthday. Just saying. Again, like I'm saying, I'm not saying that the oil filter has anything to do with the failure of this engine. Just the failure of this engine gave us the opportunity to cut open this oil filter, the one that was on the vehicle. And then I figured I might as well go ahead and cut open another oil filter, a genuine filter, just to see the differences. So let's look at the construction of the housing. Now this is going to be very subjective because it's really all off like what I'm feeling. But I feel like the Harley-Davidson oil filter housing is just hardly ever a little bit stouter. Like, I don't know if it's the gauge of material. I would measure it, but it's just a little bit stiffer, and I feel the stiffness like coming from the bottom, like the way that it's crimped down here maybe, or the way that it's like formed maybe, which is interesting. So I'm just throwing that out there. The Harley-Davidson oil filter feels like it's either a slightly heavier gauge of metal. Like, it's not the difference between like a 10 and a 12 gauge piece of metal. It's like hardly anything, but you can just barely tell that it's a little bit stiffer. The Harley-Davidson oil filter had this standoff in the bottom like that to keep the oil filter from sitting right on the bottom, which is interesting. Whereas the wicks had this little spring deal, and then that kept the filter material off the bottom. So this one had a spring. I guess this is a type of metal spring. Like, this is a different type of spring. Ooh, that is stiff though. Like, there isn't much springiness in that, really. Ugh. And that's a pretty stout spring too, but I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that's... I'm thinking I like that style. Like, it seems a little more stouter, a little more substantial. It's giving you like a better fit on the bottom of the filter as to where it fits. But the end cap Feels pretty stout, as it does here too. So it is what it is. But before we go much further, let's just jump to the top of the filter. This had a situation where it was in like so, just like that, and this one had a situation where it was in like that. These are the anti-drain bag valves. So the Harley-Davidson anti-drain bag valve is different. Like this, the Wix has a little more tabs on it to kind of like keep it from flopping down on top of these holes, whereas the Harley-Davidson one has more substantial tabs, like they're bigger and thicker and longer, and there's more of a cup shape to the Harley-Davidson one. Like it comes out and it has a very pronounced ridge where it's raised. I don't know if you can see that, versus the Wix, which is a little flatter. That's interesting. I just noticed that this top part it didn't have like a real type of seal. It's a pretty tight fit, but there isn't much of a seal right there, which is interesting. So oil could presumably pass from this side to the filtered area side, whereas the Harley-Davidson one is very positively like stamped, where like this top plate, it looks like this inner area, this inner steel piece, it looks like this inner steel piece and this outer steel piece were two different pieces. Then this inner part was set down inside, and then a press or some sort of rolling mechanism rolled over this edge here. So it has a very positive, affixed dimension to it. Which is interesting. All right, and then there's also a very obvious difference in between the Harley-Davidson and the Wix filter as far as the diameter of these holes. The Harley-Davidson one has much larger holes. Let's count them to see if there's a numerical difference. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold on, I'm going to start at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Harley-Davidson has 10 big holes. The Wix. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Whereas the Wix has 12 smaller holes. Check that out. Interesting. And then there seems to be a large difference in the filter media. Like all the way around, except for this little quadrant right here, it looks like there's more filter media on the Harley-Davidson filter. I don't know if you can pick that up, but it looks like there's a denser amount of pleats. They both appear to be the same diameter. Let me see if I can get a knife and kind of like cut through here so we can pop off the top and kind of look at the inside, because on the inside there's a lot more stuff going on. The Harley-Davidson one has a spring in there. It's got a bunch, like it looks like it's got some more gizmos in there, whereas the Wix one has this top part and this bottom part. Bing bang boom, and that's kind of it. It does have a little bit of a spring deal going on in there. Let's look at the top plates real quick since we're here. So the Wix has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 big holes, whereas the Harley-Davidson has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 slightly smaller holes. Harley-Davidson, Wix. Here on the back side, very similar. It looks like you get a couple more threads with the Harley-Davidson filter too. Let's see if we can count those. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 threads I see. And then on the wicks top plate, 1, 2, 3, I call that 4. So there's slightly more threaded area for the Harley-Davidson filter to thread onto the oil filter mount. There's a couple more indentations here for where this steel plate is stamped in there and sandwiching everything together, I would presume. You can see the Wix has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whereas the Harley-Davidson one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 little stamp marks. Interesting. I wonder how I was just noticing that there's also a difference in like the concave shape, where the Harley-Davidson one has a little more concaveness to it. Where'd I put that? And that's probably why there's such a large difference in the shape of the anti-drain back valve, which is interesting. It looks like, I don't know if that matters, but it looks like you could fit a little more volume of oil in this anti-drain back valve versus this one, which has like the smaller like little valley in here. I don't know, what do you think? Alright, like I said, I'm gonna get a knife nice and oily and try to cut this open, and let's take a look at the differences. Before we do that though, let's take a look at the oil that came out of our damaged vehicle. I don't know if I'm helping or hurting with the light, but there is so much metal in there. It is ridiculous. There is a ridiculous amount of metal in it. Just for giggles, I have this super powerful magnet. This side is clean, there's nothing on it. I'm going to go over it, but I'm going to have to put the camera down and use 2 hands because this is a metal table, and I'm going to make a mess. And I'm not even going to let it actually touch the oil. Like, it's probably 1/4 of an inch away. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to go around, take a few little sample spots. Like, I can see the shimmer way over here changing just from touching, getting close to it with the magnet. Alright, so there's definitely a lot of steel or iron pieces in there, as you can tell. Oh, and it feels just like sandpaper, as you would expect it would. Alright, so we're obviously going to be opening that engine up. Apologies if I'm going through this kind of quick. This is still very much a flat rate type of situation, but I'm just pretty curious, so I figured I'd bring you along. So here we have the differences in between the Wix oil filter that's full of metal. So here are the pleats, and it's full of trash, just 100% full. And it had 1 layer of pleats like this all the way around, and backed up with this metal wire mesh type of material. So these 2 pieces, this is all one continuous part of the filter. And this is what the inner part of the housing looks like. Now the Harley-Davidson oil filter is slightly different. It has like a normal mesh here on top, but then it also has like a finer mesh that's on top of the wire. You see that? That's pretty interesting. So it looks like it almost has like 2 layers of protection. It's hard to tell in video, but this feels more like a cottony type of substance, where this feels more like a cardboardy type of substance. And you can see like where this stuff is like kind of like bonded together. I don't know if it's just this one has like old oil on it, but it feels heavier. Let's see if I can kind of like rip it off into the same amount of length. Now this is very subjective because they have different amounts of oil on them. Now that I have them in my hand, the Wix one feels slightly thicker. Let's see if I can kind of put them right next to each other. So they're like two completely different filter substances. But that's interesting. Where the Harley Davidson one is like a two-part type of construction. And let's look at their metal filter guts. So on the right we have the Wix. On the left we have the Harley Davidson one. So lots of small little holes, where the Wix has quite a few big holes on it. Even like from cutting it, just from this angle, you can see what a difference of the type of substance that the filter material is made out of. Like the Wix one, as I was cutting through it, it was just making kind of like a crunchy sound, but it was easier to cut through because it was holding its shape. Where the Harley Davidson one was more of a mushier type of trying to get through it. So it made it a little bit tougher, and you can see how it kind of, at least with using a razor blade, it kind of mushed it over more. But we got our answer. There's a whole poop load of metal in the Wix oil filter that came from this engine that's making a noise. But if you haven't seen where all of this metal mess came from, check the link down below in the description. There's going to be a link to Milwaukee 8 that's making a whole lot of engine noise, and that's how we got into cutting open the oil filter and seeing all of the metal. So now we know that we're definitely taking the engine apart. So I'm going to take you back over to the vehicle, and then we're going to get the gas tank off, and then pull the top part of the valve train off, and then pull the cam cover and the oil pump, the cam plate, and see what we find. And then, all right, now that we have the rocker boxes off, well, the top rocker boxes, let me grab a flashlight. So everything's looking fine with the valve springs. Everything's looking fine with the valve springs and valves. At least to this point, everything's looking together. It's not like there's anything really clearly broken. With the rear, the fronts are also looking pretty good. It's normal to have some wear on these thrust surfaces, but you know, I'm going to be honest, I have never noticed that there's like this weird offset in here before. A little bit of wear. Still straight. Straight enough. Everything's looking good there. Everything's looking pretty normal there. I'm just looking in the pocket. Right now we're looking for wild and crazy stuff. We aren't looking for we don't need to nitpick absolutely everything at this initial inspection point. We just want to make sure that we don't overlook something simple. So everything looks pretty good. We're going to keep on going and pull the cam chest out and see everything there. I'm sure we'll find some good stuff. So let's keep on going. Well, that's it for today. I'm going to come back tomorrow, take off the rest of the heads and the cylinders, just to make 100% sure that everything is ruined. So when I give corporate a call on Tuesday, I have all of the information, and that will put us in the best case scenario. So that's where we're at. I'll clean the rest of the components off tomorrow, and we'll have a little bit closer of a view and see what's going on. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.